the National Institute for Security Studies, Joseph O. Odama, FSI, and members of your management team, distinguished members of Course 18 of the Institute, members of my entourage, among whom is the Deputy Speaker of Imo State House of Assembly, and distinguished and honorable members of the National Assembly, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Let me humbly extend the warm greetings from the government and good people of Imo State, the Eastern Heartland, the land of shared prosperity, the gas hub of West Africa, an emerging digital economy, and indeed a state on the rise. I'm deeply honored to deliver this year's Distinguished Personality Lecture to this very distinguished audience. This platform is quite prestigious because of the quality of minds that has just been introduced by the coordinator of this program. I see you as strategic thinkers. I see you as operational commanders, intelligence architects. And your job, which among others, is to shape Africa's security response in an era of unprecedented uncertainty with very bogus challenges. I recall that 5 years ago, I stood in this hallowed chamber to deliver a similar lecture to participants of the Executive Intelligence Management Course 13. And that was precisely on the 9th of October 2020. The topic then was promoting national security and sustainable development, the Imo State experience. At that time, I was still battling with the hydra-headed security challenges in my state, and my experience was quite relevant to the lecture. I had been in office for less than a year at that time. But today, I stand here again to deliver another thought-provoking lecture to the participants of the Executive Intelligence Management Course 18. And here again, this topic is equally weighty. Non-state actors on entrepreneurship development in Africa. Challenges, responses, and way forward. I think to have been invited twice in 5 years to speak on security challenges in Africa generally, and Nigeria in particular, for me is a great privilege. I deeply appreciate it. However, if I'm invited for a third time in another 5 years, I may consider charging some modest consultancy fees. The topic before us, non-state actors and entrepreneurship development in Africa, challenges, responses, and way forward, touches the nerve of a paradox which you will navigate every day in your various areas of work. Non-state actors in Africa operate in the space between state capacity and citizen need. Some fill the gaps which government cannot effectively fill. Others exploit those gaps to destabilize, extract, and undermine. The challenge for security and intelligence professionals is not simply identifying who these actors are. It is understanding what they do, why they matter, and how states should respond strategically. Because the uncomfortable truth is that non-state actors are not going anywhere. They are permanent features of Africa's political, economic, and security landscape. The question is whether we treat them as threats to be eliminated, or partners to be engaged, or realities to be managed. Today, I don't want to offer you theory. I want to offer you something grounded in life experience. What I have learned as governor of Imo State, confronting armed non-state actors who nearly paralyzed our economy, and what I have seen across Nigeria and the continent, all these dynamics that play out in different forms at different times or the other, according to peculiarities. My goal today is to help you think more strategically about non-state actors, how to distinguish those who build from those who destroy, how to engage without legitimizing, and how to contain without radicalizing. In trying to map out the terrain, the big question that we want to know or answer is, who are Africa's non-state actors? Let me begin by defining the landscape. When we speak about non-state actors in Africa, we are not talking about a single category of people. We are talking about a spectrum of entities operating outside formal state structure, each with different motivations, different capacities, and impacts on development and security. In this regard, I wish to identify 5 groups of non-state actors to be able to facilitate this our conversation this afternoon. The B1 group, the non-state actors who are seen as entrepreneurs and builders. These are individuals and companies investing in infrastructure, creating jobs, delivering services where state capacity falls short. In Nigeria, private actors fund power generation, road construction, and telecommunication infrastructure, which the government struggles to provide. Across Africa, from Lagos to Nairobi to Kigali, entrepreneurial ecosystems are driven largely by non-state investments. These actors don't challenge state authority. They complement it, often out of necessity, yet they are not formal structures. The category B2, which are the intermediaries. These groups operate between citizens and the state. They advocate for policy reform, deliver humanitarian services, monitor governance, and amplify citizen voices. At their best, they strengthen accountability and transparency At their worst, they become vehicles for foreign agendas or political manipulations. They are essentially players in Africa's governance architecture, whether states like it or not. Then the category 3, which is B3, the disruptors. This is where security and intelligence professionals spend most of their attention, and rightly so. You recall things like the Boko Haram and ISWAP in the northeastern part of Nigeria, the bandit networks terrorizing the northwest in Nigeria, the separatist agitators and criminal groups destabilizing the southeast in Nigeria, armed militias across the Sahel. These actors do not fill governance gaps, they exploit them. They disrupt trade routes, displace populations, extract resources, and create parallel governance structures that directly challenge the state authority. This is the most terrible group. In the group 4, B4, the financiers, these are diaspora networks and philanthropic foundations. Africa's diaspora remittance, which is in the neighborhood of $95 billion annually, more than total official development assistance that comes from the international community. These funds finance small businesses, they finance education, healthcare, and local enterprise. Philanthropic foundations, both African and international, invest in development projects like research and capacity building. These actors, what they do, they shape development outcomes without state oversight. And their influence is gradually and incrementally growing. Then the last category, which is the category B5, the new infrastructure. These are found in digital platforms and tech ecosystems. Mobile money platforms like M-Pesa in Kenya now move more money than traditional banks. Fintech startups are democratizing access to capital. E-commerce platforms are connecting markets. Social media also shapes public opinion. Sometimes it mobilizes protests and spreads both information and disinformation. These digital non-state actors are rewriting the rules of economic participation and political engagement faster than states can regulate. But in taking an overview of the entire system, now here is what makes this terrain so complex for intelligence and security professionals. These actors do not operate in silos. They intersect, they compete, and sometimes collaborate in ways that reshape governance and development. For example, a diaspora investor fund, a tech startup that creates jobs. This is positive. But that same startup's platform gets used by criminal networks to coordinate illicit activity. This is negative. So a civil society organization advocates for community rights. This is constructive. But it also provides political cover for armed groups operating in these communities, destabilizing the communities. So the intelligence challenge is not just mapping these actors. It is about understanding the networks, the financing flows, the motivations, and the moments when actors shift from one role to another role. This is to mapping out two broad categories of non-state actors for more insightful discussions. Non-state actors Big question. As catalysts or as traitors? Let me address the paradox directly. Non-state actors are simultaneously catalysts for development and threats to stability. Understanding this duality is essential for strategic response. Non-state actors as catalysts for entrepreneurship and development. Where state capacity falls short, private actors often step in. It is easy to call this charity. Actually, it is survival and opportunity combined. In Lagos, for instance, private investors, they fund road infrastructure, they fund power generation, they fund waste management because the government alone cannot meet all the development needs instantaneously. No government can. In Kigali, public-private partnership have transformed the city's infrastructure and business environment. In Nairobi, tech hubs and entrepreneurial ecosystem thrive largely on non-state capital and initiatives. Diaspora remittances, currently estimated at $95 billion annually across Africa, fund countless small enterprises and projects. They educate our children. They provide health care that states struggle to deliver. And this is very easy because unlike loans, that doesn't require repayment to foreign creditors. These are direct investments in Africa to our families and communities. And they are more efficient and targeted to our needs, more than even some government programs. But the entrepreneurial ecosystem across the continent demonstrates what happens when non-state actors are aligned with development goals. When they align with development goals, they create jobs, they generate tax revenue, they build skills and provide services. They prove that capacity exists outside the state. And when channeled constructively, because it's not about the capacity from non-state actors, whether positive or negative, but how they are channeled. Are they channeled to our priorities and to our needs? If they do, it accelerates development. But when you look at non-state actors as traitors, the same landscape that enables entrepreneurship also enables disruption. Armed groups across the Sahel in Nigeria's northeast and northwest and in parts of the southeast do not fill governance gap alone. They weaponize them. And when they are weaponized, you can now imagine the consequence. Boko Haram and ISWAP, they exploit weak state presence in border regions, governance voids in rural communities, economic exclusion among youths. Not only do they attack military targets, they disrupt agricultural production, they close schools, displace the entire population, and make economic activity impossible. Farmers cannot farm, traders cannot trade, investors flee, and development flees with them. In Nigeria Northwest, the bandit networks have created a parallel economy based on kidnapping, cattle rustling, and extortion. They control territory, they extract revenue, and they operate with impunity in areas where state presence is weak or absent. It is clear that these are not ideological insurgents, but criminal enterprises. that have militarized and now challenge state authority with impunity. So in the Southeast, which I will address in detail shortly, we saw how criminal groups masquerading as agitators for political causes, they nearly paralyzed the economy of an entire region through targeted violence, extortion, and intimidation. These unregulated actors, they create parallel governance structure that weakens state authority. They even collect taxes, adjudicate disputes, provide security, and deliver the so-called justice, all functions that should belong to the state. So when citizens turn to non-state actors for services the government will provide, the state's legitimacy is eroded. So the intelligence challenge is, for security and intelligence professionals, the group whom I'm talking with now this afternoon, the critical question is this: when do non-state actors complement state capacity? And when do they compete with it or even replace it? The distinction determines your response. Complementary actors can be engaged. They can also be regulated and channeled towards development. Competing actors must be contained, disrupted, or eliminated. The challenge is that actors can shift between these categories rapidly, and intelligence often lags behind. So the critical and central to the solution is our capacity for intelligence gathering and understanding the intentions of the activities of non-state actors, whether from the negative point of view or from the positive point of view. You cannot respond strategically to what you don't understand. That means better mapping of non-state actor networks, motivations, and financing. It means understanding not just who they are, but understanding why they exist and what sustains them and how they interact with state and non-state structures. Now, the practical lessons from Imo State and beyond. Let me now ground this discussion in concrete reality. What we faced in Imo State, how we responded, what worked, what didn't also work, and what intelligence gaps remained. When I assumed office as governor of Imo State in January 2020, the security situation in the Southeast was deteriorating rapidly. Criminal groups, some masquerading as agitators for Biafran independence, others operating purely for economic gain, had established a reign of terror across the region. In Imo State specifically, these groups attacked police stations, prisons, and government facilities. Some of us may remember the dreadful event of April 5th, 2021, when these criminals launched a coordinated attack on the Owerri Custodial Center, freeing nearly 2,000 hardened criminals. That event greatly compromised the security as many escapees returned to reinforce armed groups. They murdered security personnel, burnt vehicles, destroyed infrastructure. They imposed illegal sit-at-home orders that paralyzed economic activities every Monday. Markets stayed closed. Schools were shut down. Businesses collapsed. Ordinary citizens lived in fear. You could not strictly call this an insurgency in the classical sense. It was organized criminality exploiting political grievances and ethnic identity to create a facade of legitimacy. The groups operated from forest camps, particularly in Osun and part of Olu. They financed themselves through kidnapping, extortion, and armed robbery. And they thrived because state presence in those areas were weak. Our response required both kinetic and non-kinetic approaches. First, we strengthened security operations. Working with the Nigerian Army, police, and other security agencies, we conducted targeted operations to dislodge these groups from their forest camps. We recovered weapons, arrested suspects, and dismantled infrastructure which they had built in ungoverned spaces. This was necessary. You cannot negotiate with actors who are actively killing citizens and security personnel. But we also recognize that purely kinetic responses would fail if we fail to address the underlying conditions which these groups exploited. Young people with no economic opportunities became easy recruits. Communities with no state presence became safe havens. Grievances, real or perceived, about marginalization became mobilization tools. So we invested in infrastructure across the state, particularly in areas previously neglected. We built roads, established security posts, and increased state visibility. We created youth empowerment programs, skill acquisition centers, and entrepreneurship funds to provide alternatives to criminality. We engaged community leaders, traditional rulers, and civil society organizations to rebuild trust between citizens and government. We made it clear that legitimate grievances would be heard and addressed, but violence would not be tolerated. So the combination of security operations and economic inclusion reduced the group's operational space. As we increase state presence and provide economic alternatives, recruitment dried up, and some actors even embraced amnesty. As we dismantled their camps, their capacity to launch attacks diminished. As we engaged communities, intelligence flow improved. Today, Imo State is significantly more secure than it was 3 years ago. Markets are open, schools function, investors are returning. That didn't happen by chance. It happened because we understood that you cannot shoot your way out of a problem rooted in governance voids and economic exclusion. Pure military operations without follow-up governance would have failed. When we cleared an area of armed groups, they did not establish state presence immediately. They simply returned. When we arrested foot soldiers, they didn't disrupt financing networks. New recruits replaced them. The intelligence gaps, we still don't fully understand the financing networks sustaining these groups. Kidnapping ransoms provide some funding, but not enough to explain their capacity. There are external actors, such as diaspora networks, political sponsors, criminal syndicates, whose role still remains unclear. We also struggle with predictive intelligence. By the time we know a group is planning an attack, response time is limited. What we need is deeper penetration of these networks to understand motivations, recruitment patterns, and decision-making processes. What we faced in Imo State is a microcosm of what Nigeria confronts nationally and what many African states face today. In the Northeast, Boko Haram and ISWAP, they have exploited governance voids, economic